the weekend. So you can think about this all weekend, and we can come back on Monday and have more conversations. But one of the questions that I oftentimes get asked is, how do you measure diversity, equity, and inclusion? And more specifically, more recently, how do you measure this notion of belonging? And one of the things that I think is important for us to think about is that it's really hard to measure relationships, right? So when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, there are these aspects of that are pretty prima facie, right? The fact that the 1964 Civil Rights Act is really clear about what discrimination looks like, who can it apply to, what are some of those defining characteristics. So that's pretty prima facie. When we get into this equity and inclusion part of the mix, that's where things kind of get fuzzy. And then ultimately we get really fuzzy when we talk about, like, how is it that people feel like they belong, right? And one of the examples that I use for, like, looking at inclusion and then looking at belonging is much like joy and happiness, right? So when I'm participating in a thing, I am joyful at that moment, and then later I'll reflect on it and say that made me happy, right? And so and with belonging and inclusion, I'm not sure, which is it, the chicken or the egg, but I know it's a symbiotic relationship. And ultimately, when people feel like they belong, they will give their best, right? They will give above and beyond when they feel that they belong. And that inclusion really is this process that we, or this platform that we build belonging on top of, right? So if we have a good foundation of inclusive behaviors, we have a diverse staff, we have the opportunity for people to get treated equitably in their responsibilities, then ultimately we're able to get the sense of belonging. And so when I think about, like, how do you measure that? How do you look at that? One way that I really like to address that is by thinking about it through the lens of change management, right? Like, this is really trying to help organizations advance themselves. And as a leader, I can use those same tools to advance my team or create a foundation for my team. And so when we think about this ADKAR model of change management and we apply it to diversity, then I begin to come up with methods that help us to consistently be aligned, right? And so when I talk about this idea of alignment, what am I talking about? I'm talking about how we align our intentions, our goals, our values to our behavior, right? And so when we have that alignment, I would suggest that we are being effective. And oftentimes people get caught up in, is that good behavior, bad behavior? I want to know, according to our intentions, as those intentions align with our values, as our values help us achieve our goals, and we have these behaviors, whether the behavior is good or bad is determining on those four factors, on that alignment. Right? And so when we think about this ADKAR model, this is a way that we can continually help our organizations and our teams, and I would go as far as to say even ourselves, continually be focused on development. Right? And so the first A in ADKAR is awareness, right? So as a manager, as a supervisor, as a leader, how aware are you both of the internal and external context that your team is operating under, right? But how aware are you, right? That doesn't mean you have to know everything, right? You don't have to watch, all of the cable news channels. You don't have to read all of the papers, but you need to be mindful of the context by which you're leading, right? Next is your desire. And so how does desire present itself, right? What I know is that when I'm interested in something, there's not much that can stop me from researching it, studying it, listening to it, going to lectures, watching films, and instructional, sitting down with people who know more about that than I do, so that I discover. And so when you think about the teams that you're leading, how much appetite is there for that? And then as a leader, how do you create the appetite, the desire? How do people see what's in it for them, right? And so as a leader, that's you can start to answer that. And then knowledge. And these are, this notion of gathering knowledge about a subject, about building better relationships. This really comes down to the individual having the desire to do so and then going above and beyond. And so as an organization, oftentimes we have the responsibility to provide the basic baseline, the facts, right? And we'll see that sometimes in EEO statements that identify, our relationship to Title IX or to HIPAA or to the 64 Civil Rights Act or the EEOC, right? So that's the baseline. But above that baseline, what do people know about their interactions? And I would suggest that the more people know, the more they have the ability to interact with each other, which leads us to the second A, which is this ability. How often do we practice the skills that we now know about, right? So when we talk about cultural competence, how often is that brought up in staff meetings? How often is that a topic of discussion? How often do we seek out the dissenting voice as we're trying to build these effective teams? And then what gets reinforced is what sticks, right? And so are we reinforcing the kinds of behaviors that we want to see from our teams? Do we get reinforcement of our own behaviors that we want to see? And so as we think about staying in alignment or moving in alignment, I want you to remember the ADKAR model. I also want you to remember that it's important to align our intentions, our values, our goals to our behavior. My name is Andre Koen. I want to say thank you so much for joining us in this conversation, and we look forward to seeing who you become as we continue these difficult and challenging conversations. This is Andre Koen. Have a good day. Oh, by the way, you can join us. If you have any questions, comments, please feel to join us at andrecohen.com. You can also find us on most social media channels, and we look forward to seeing who you become. Bye.